Thank you. There we go. Thank you all so much for coming this evening. We really appreciate it, and it's so fabulous to see everyone in person and our online friends as well. It's lovely to see you. So good evening. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we're meeting today, and that's the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung and Bunurong Boonwurrung people of the Kulin Nations. And I'd like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. So, is this anyone's first Our Ladies event? Welcome. Thank you for coming. I might ask you later why you decided to come, but that's more of a me statistic if I'd like to know. So who are we? Well, Our Ladies Melbourne is a registered non-for-profit organisation and a local chapter of Our Ladies Global. So there are many Our Ladies chapters around the world, and we're just one humble organisation. And our aim is to promote gender diversity within our community, both in Australia and worldwide. So some of you might be familiar with Our Ladies. We've actually changed our name from Our Ladies to Our Ladies Plus, and that's to recognise that we are inclusive of all gender minorities, not just cis women. So we're trying to preserve our established identity by keeping Our Ladies, but also adding that plus, which means a lot. So if you scan that QR code, you can get linked to us on all of our social media. We try and post as much as we can, especially leading up to events. And we try and host an event every month. So this is hopefully the first of many this year. So we're on Blue Sky, YouTube, where this talk will be shown afterwards. We're on Slack as well, so please join us on our Slack community. We're trying to make it a nice, friendly place for a bunch of friendly faces to come together. And you can also email us if you have an idea that you'd like to share with us, or message us on any of these platforms. We're also continuously extending invitations to any woman or underrepresented gender to join our community and our committee. So if you'd like to take part in behind the scenes, what happens in organising events, please let us know. And we also want to extend our sincere gratitude for DS for actually hosting us today and for continuing to host us. So we'd like to plug our expression of interest form. So if you have a seminar, workshop, or small talk in mind that you've come up with today, even after talking with some new friends, and you'd like to give a seminar, please let us know. We'd love to hear about it. And you can do that on our website, r-ladiesmelbourne.github.io. Have to have a GitHub website. And you can find that on the QR code there as well. Alrighty, so let's get to the meat of today. So let's introduce our speaker. Would you like me to give a formal introduction, or you just want to get into it? All right, let's introduce Kate. Thank you. Give a round of applause. All right, I'll just get the screen. Give me a time, like 30 to 40 was what I read. Yeah, that's great. Feel free to adjust any of the settings.
Where's my screen? Just because I can see up there. Can I?
Oh, you want it to
be on?
Yes. You're not.
Sorry.
No. I'm going to stop sharing on Zoom for 1 second. Okay, now let's do this. Stop extending. Stop mirroring. Okay. Share. Revise. Here we go.
Yeah, nice. Thank you.
Okay. Feel free to change it.
Yep. Just, I think we've got scrolling with death. Hang on. Oh, there we go. Thing on. Yeah. Okay. Nice. Cool. So I've met some of you before, which is nice. This is pretty informal. So if you want to ask me anything, just go for it. I totally don't mind. Who am I? I was writing my slides very last minute. And for some reason, I defined myself today by my PhD, which I think was one of the worst decisions I've made recently. Like there's fun stuff below, but though, so I did do a PhD in statistics where I learnt to code in R, and that was, that was a while ago now. I'm actually a lecturer at Monash. I can see people I've taught in the room, which is actually really cool. Yeah, so professionally, I work in kind of this interdisciplinary space of statistics and climate. But who am I really? Well, I have a range of other interests. I have a dog. She's very cute. And because I'm here, she didn't get a walk today and she's sad, but that's okay. I really like being outdoors and trying to do fun things. Like work's great, but not work is better. And so here's me learning to scuba dive last year. I also really love playing basketball, and one of the things I do in my free time is I code for fun, which might be weird. I've been told it's weird, but maybe this is the audience for that level of weird. So yeah, and I came to Our Ladies for the first time a really long time ago. It would have been during my PhD, and I can remember sitting where you are, and we were actually doing a tutorial on like Twitter scraping, and they were running through these exercises, and I had no idea what was going on. Like I was sitting there and I just didn't have any idea at all. And so I just wanted to say that, like, I'm standing at the front here. I lecture for a living, so I'm very confident talking to people, but I've built a set of skills over the course of a very, very long time now. And so I just wanted to kind of point out that learning stuff doesn't happen magically. It takes a lot of effort and it takes a lot of time. And so like the first time I used R properly, professionally, was in my job at CSIRO in like 2012, where my colleague Carolyn Houston like basically sat me down and gave me the basics. And then 2014, I learned about tidyverse, I think, and then web scraping in 2015. And you can see them just adding something in maybe every year to this depth of understanding that I now have. And so coding, and there's a number of achievements there. This is not like the start or the finish of what I have, but I thought as my career has evolved, there's the other things that I've developed beyond some of these coding skills, which is like, how do I talk to people? How do I communicate interdisciplinary research? And these are skills that you can work on and build as on top of this technical foundation that you might be developing. Okay. So fantasy basketball. This is what I do for fun. This is a weird confluence of like, I can code, I think about weather forecasting and statistical models. I think about data visualization and communication into disciplinary audiences. And this is just the nexus of all these things coming together in a very fun way for me. And so if you don't know what is fantasy basketball, it's this basically online game where you draft real NBA players and create your own virtual team. And then your team earns points based on how those players perform in the real world. That might be points scored or rebounds. You might lose points if they do something bad. It can be assists. There's a whole range of different stuff. And basically, you compete against another team or other people in your league, and the best team wins. And what's cool about it is like each fantasy league is set up slightly differently. So you can have a different scoring system, you can have a different team configuration, you can have different roster rules. It's very flexible. Okay. And so general idea is you're now a general manager of an NBA team, and the results depend on what's actually happening in real life. So what does the app look like? I'm not sure if you can see. This is what my mobile app looks like that I play on. This is what I'm given to kind of make decisions, and this is what my team looks like currently. And this was actually this is today's matchup, but tomorrow in the US. So I've got a few different players here. Derek White, Drew Holiday, and they have positions. I also have a bench of players as well. So if you've got a player on the bench and they score some points, actually they won't score points for you because they're not in your fantasy lineup for that day, right? And so there's a lot of managing your team and making sure when people play. You also have like a in reserve as well. So if you have a player injured, you can kind of save them and add someone else. And so this is kind of my team matchup. Yeah.
Can you sub people? Like, does it play the game? Or does it just you pick, like, I don't know how many people have basketball, and then you just have them the whole time?
So you start off the season by doing a draft. You can auto draft, but we went to the pub, which was nice. And then we did what's known as a snake draft. So like you would pick, then you would pick, then you would pick, then you would pick, then I would pick. And if it was I'm the last person to pick, we go back the other way. So I pick again, then you, then you, then you, then you. And so that's one way of doing it. And so there's actually a lot of, you can go and read up about draft statistics and what's the optimal way to do your draft. There's a lot of stuff around there about that, which I found really interesting, but less about how that you actually play the week to week stuff. Yeah, so we did a draft, and then if I do have an injured player, I can drop them and pick up someone else to replace them. So there's an adding and dropping component to managing your team. Yeah, did that answer the question?
In basketball, how many players are there on the team?
Okay. So this is one of the things you set yourself. So your team configuration will be, so in the real world, there's a fixed number. You've got 5 on the court at any time. In the fantasy world, I've got 11 people who can play in the team that day, and they can all score points at different times, and 3 people on the bench and 2 in reserve. And so you define those league settings when you set up your fantasy basketball team. Yeah.
So if any of those 11 people scored a goal that day,
yep,
you get those points.
I get points, yeah. If they do a nice assist, if they steal the ball, I might get points too. Yeah. Cool. And so this is my matchup for tomorrow. And so this is my team. I just used the ESPN default, which called me Kate's top-notch team, which was very creative. But yeah, and I'm playing my friend's team, who's called Showtime. And you can see that in the middle here, these are the player positions. So this is point guard, short forward, shooting forward, point forward, center, guard, etc. And then you have your what time they play. Yeah, so this is Derek White, Boston Celtics, playing at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. That's our time in Melbourne. And so if he scores some points tomorrow, I will get those points on my fantasy team. Yeah. And there are other players who aren't playing games tomorrow. So this guy here, Karl Anthony Towns, he doesn't have a game tomorrow, but I still had to fill up my lineup of players. And so he won't score any points for me, but that's okay. Yes.
So the 2 main decision points, I'm assuming, is the first is when you do the draft and you pick who's in your team at all, and then the second is each week who's in the 11.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So the draft is a really key decision point. A draft can make or break your team for the season. If you do drafting really badly, that might be it. But week to week, you then have to manage your team. And so you're making constant decisions about who I want to play on what day and who should be in my team lineup. Yeah. Okay. All right. And so say I do want to replace someone because Karl Anthony Towns isn't playing tomorrow, so I want to actually get some points. I might drop him and pick up someone else. Then I can go and look in my player pool. And you can see these are all the players available for me to pick up. Maybe I want to pick up someone who's actually playing so I can get some points. And so then I need to make a decision about how do I pick them up. And so the information that I'm able to have in this ESPN app is things like, well, what are their 7-day average? What's their 15-day average? What's their 30-day average? What's their season average? There's like an overall projection for the season. I don't find that particularly useful, and there's a few other things. And so short-term averages favor their more recent performance. Your long-term averages will say how they've gone across the entire season. Yeah, and so this is the information you have if you choose you want to swap a player around. Okay. How are we going? Does that make sense? We're ready to manage our fantasy team?
Yeah, instead of person.
This can change. So currently I'm in the first week of our finals, and this will be a 2-week period that we're facing up against each other. But most of the time it's a week.
So over the 2-week period, you swap the players out and stuff to get as many points as possible.
Yes.
And then at the end of the 2 weeks, it's whoever got the most points.
Yeah. And so if I go back to here, at the very bottom, you'll see 0 of 14. So I basically get 14 allowable changes as part of my current league setting. So I can change my players 14 times if there's an injury.
Is that just 2 weeks? So if it's a 1 week?
Yep.
Do you get 14 points?
If it was a week game, I'd probably have 7. If it's a week where they've only got 4 games, then I might only have 4. So it's roughly any day when they're playing games, I'll have an opportunity to change a player. Yep.
So it depends on player from back at start of the season game. I reckon those two teams maybe in the playoffs.
Yeah.
And who would actually stay to play with those teams?
So fantasy cuts off before playoffs happen for this very reason, because you want to have everybody playing, otherwise that wouldn't be fair. So most teams will wrap up their fantasy season before the playoffs even happen, because you wouldn't want to have people who aren't continuing on the season. Yeah. Good questions. Yeah. Okay. And so I like this, and I also had questions when I started to play. And I actually found it really hard to manage my fantasy team. And that might be just because of how I'm used to thinking about information and data, but I found these kind of big, long lookup tables and these general stats to not be particularly informative of like what's happening here. Like on today, do I need to make some player changes? It looks like I'm ahead, but am I actually ahead? Or is tomorrow my opponent going to have lots of players playing and they'll catch up, and then maybe I'm not ahead? Depends on what the schedule is. So I actually have no idea if I'm winning or losing overall this week at this point. I can't tell. And so that makes it quite hard. Yeah, so I also don't necessarily know if I'm expected to beat my opponent. Like, is my team any good? Am I likely to win? If I look at any 2 matchups for a day, am I likely to win that day? And then am I likely to win that week? These are things that I wanted to know, like how confident I am and that I'm going to win, because that might change how I drop and add players. Which days are players even playing? So if I want to get points, can I do smart things in terms of picking up a player who'll play 2 games in a row, for example, because then I'll get more points than if I just had someone who play 1 game. And like all these kind of things, like who should I pick up? Should I make changes to my lineup? I think at a basic level, I would like to be able to answer these questions, right? And in Australia, we don't bet on fantasy basketball, and I don't really have an interest in betting, but I think if you're betting, you might want to know some of these things. I would hope you would be interested in answering these things. Yeah. And so I think from a starting point, I really need some visualization, right? I think there's a really key thing missing that I should be able to look at like the projected forecast for my team for the week. I also would like to know roughly how many points I expect to score in any given day. And because of the importance of the game schedule, I also want to be able to look at that. So these are like the most basic things that I want that aren't in the ESPN app currently, as far as I understand. And basically some idea of uncertainty, like how confident am I about these things? And to do that, I need some data. And luckily for me, there are some really nice basketball art packages that already exist that I can use. So quick Google, and I find out there's a package called WeHoop, and they provide access to the women's basketball data, so the WNBA. That's also the college basketball, and you can get play-by-play data, you get team and player statistics, you can get game schedules. There's so much data here that I haven't even had a chance to go through it all. It's huge amounts. It's really, really cool.
Fantasy with the women's data, or is the fantasy only for the men's, or is it both?
So there's fantasy for the women's data as well. Yes, so I've played both fantasy women's and fantasy men's leagues.
And they're 2 separate leagues. Yeah.
Yeah. There's another package too called Hooper, which has the men's data. Same kind of thing. They're almost exactly the same formats, which is really nice. They're not quite. There's a few small differences, but very similar. And I think they're written by the same people who have like a sports dataverse of packages and R that you can use. So what does it look like? Well, I can just load the library, WeHoop. I can get the most recent season. And then I can look at the team box. And this is, for example, this is the game ID, this is the season, game date time. Remember, this is the US, so you've got teams playing all over different parts of the country. if I'm trying to do player adds and drop in my app, I'm doing those player adds and drops in a time zone in Melbourne that I'm then trying to cross-reference with a data set that has time zones from the US. So lots of fun things to deal with from a coding perspective. You can see the different team names here. What else have you got? You've got team colors. I didn't know the team colors were in here until I was preparing this talk, and I actually asked ChatGPT to give them to me, which I was very good at, but I could have used this data. And this is what I mean. There's so much data in here. It's very rich. Whether they were home and away, what the score was, who was the winner, the total team statistics, like how many assists, blocks, defensive rebounds, flagrant fouls. So you can see there's just so much stuff in here, right? It's really cool. Keep scrolling down. You get the opponent stats now. So they played the Phoenix. Yeah, and so this is the team box. Lots of data. Very cool. There's also a team reference. So I play in the ESPN fantasy app, but there's other apps like Yahoo and things like this, but there's a team reference data set as well. I'll just draw your attention down here to the Golden State Valkyries team ID. When you start playing with data, you find all sorts of weird stuff. And so this was a team that had their first season last year. And so you can see there that their team ID is a bit weird. I would have thought it would go 1 to however many teams in the league, but there's this weird, I have no idea why this number looks like this. But I tried to filter based on the number of teams in the league and failed very badly because of this when I was doing some analysis. Yeah. And you also find that things like the abbreviation here might not match some of the like team try codes and things like this. So you see like GS here, but that might be GSB in another one of the data sets. So you have to look out for the team abbreviation matching things like the try code. So as you deal with this data, you'll find all these kind of weird nuances in it, which is very fun. You can also get the player box data. So we looked at the team data before, so how did the team perform? But you can also get the data for any individual player. So this is Nafisa Collier. She was my top drafted player when I played fantasy last season, and she was exceptional. And so these are all her player stats. So like how many minutes did she play, like all her individual stats. And then you can see there's other things in here, like she didn't play this game. Why didn't she play? Well, it was a left ankle injury. And so there's a level of granularity about this data that's actually really helpful. Yeah.
Per game, like increments is the rows. Okay.
Yeah. Every game, this is every Rose game. And you can see her position as forward. Yeah, team abbreviation again. Yeah, and as I said, there's so much in this. Like I don't pretend to be across all of this at all. Yeah.
Do you only look at the total number of points scored, or you also kind of like calculate the ratio between like points scored with like the minutes played?
Oh, I will talk about minutes and points in a second. It's a good question. Yeah, so minutes and points are very related and they're very important. I will come back to that. You can also get the game schedule. Now you might notice I haven't put the table out here. For whatever reason, when you're calling this API in the package, it seems to time out on me. So like maybe every third try, it'll be great. But there are some times where it doesn't seem to run, which will mean my slides won't compile. So I've just not echoed the output here. And I also had a fight with this function for the men's league recently. So I'm not sure what's going on there. I need to get into the details and check.
Have you saved it? The data?
No, Harriet. As we will see later. Yeah. But I only do it, like I only created the slides for this. Okay. So when I'm doing it in other places then, and I do need to recall the data all the time because new information comes in. And so this data is accurate to maybe 1 or 2 days. So I can't be using, if I was doing this like in a betting professional sense, this data is probably not quite recent enough. It will do a very good job. But you have to wait maybe a day or 2 before the database gets updated for you to pull, unless I was to write it myself and do it. Yeah.
So is the data collected by a human? So I was thinking like fouls, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm sure that would probably take some points away from you if you had someone on and they got fouled off or something, or like getting fouls. Is this data being collected that is like actually in the fantasy, like within that? Is that being collected by a human?
So I think all the NBA stuff is probably very automated these days. Like, I think if they sneeze, there's probably like a person sneezed at 11:02, and yeah. It's
another sport. I do don't
yeah.
Yeah, a lot of the time there are these eyeballs, but then I'm not speaking.
I mean, I feel like though if the ref calls it like then it's like an official like foul or whatever, then it's more like if it's a bad thing by then, is it just
yeah, I am it's anything official. So like if you imagine like a score sheet, it would be what would go down on the score sheet at the end of the thing. Yeah. But if you get thrown out because you did a flagrant foul and you don't play minutes at the end of the game, that will be in there somewhere. There's play-by-play data, which I haven't shown, but yeah. Yes. And so Malini asked me about this minutes versus points. Like, I want to maximize my points. Turns out the more minutes you play, unsurprisingly, the more points you score. And so you can have a look on the x-axis here. This is my minutes played versus like my points scored. And like early on, if I played like 1 minute, I can't score 50 points, right? So there's this like dead triangle in the top of this graph here where you can't be scoring points. And it's only as you get further along here, like the more you play, the more points you can score. But there's actually this, we would call it like heteroscedasticity in stats, is this idea that there's more variability in the amount of minutes. So like here, there's some players who like only score 10 points if they play 40 minutes, and other players who score like 40 points, right? So it can be very variable. But in general, more minutes, more points. Yeah. And this is the real world. So this is straight out of our player box that I had before. So these are my labels, the label text I had. This is my player box that I downloaded. I've done a little filter here. I've just gotten rid of anybody who didn't actually play any minutes, because sometimes there'll be players who sit on the bench the whole game. And I've basically said I only want to look at people who scored 2 points. And so I've done a little filter. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yes. Yeah. So if I plot every player individually, so on game 1, player 1 scored this many points, and I do that for the entire season, then I end up plotting tons of points all over each other, and I can't see the kind of trend in the data. I see there's a big point cloud, but I don't see that the density, yeah. And so what this is instead of using like a scatter plot, I'll just show you here. I've just changed this line of code to geom hex. And so this plots like the heat map effectively. So each of these cells now is like a bin. Yeah. So for 10, like for just over 10 minutes and 2 points scored, there were roughly like, I don't know, 25 people who scored that amount of points. So that's what each of these individual bins mean. Thank you. That was a good clarifying question. And part of the reason I like to plot it like this too is because you can see that if I was to put a line of best fit through this thing, let's draw a line of best fit, it would probably go through the data here, somewhere there, plus the uncertainty. Yeah.
Kate, I have a question.
Yes.
So is this the whole team? Because within the team you have a one card and all of that.
Every individual player.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so maybe I'm jumping ahead, but are you asking like, do different positions score more points?
Yeah, so if I was assigned to a position where I meant to score, that would
Yeah, no, so centers, for example, who are the big tall people under the basket, pulling down the rebounds, and if you're scoring rebounds, they can score a lot of points. So in my fantasy league, we're not allowed to have more than 4 centers in our team makeup, because otherwise you could really weight your team in an unfair way. Yeah. And so if you look at this plot for different positions, in general, you're still seeing this relationship between minutes and points, but it might change a little bit for some different positions. Yeah. The line of best fit would change slightly, I think. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so this is my code that I used to do this. I did that little filter. It's just this is the hex. This makes it the bin density. I've changed the palette to oranges because that's the same color as the basketball. I hope you like that. Yeah, and I did have a line of best fit in there, but I commented it out. Yeah. Okay. So this is real world, right? But fantasy world, you score points in a different way. And so one of the cool things that I've picked up as part of this project is like, well, I want to tidy my data. I want to create a score function. So how can I do that in a nice way? So here, this is the current default configuration for ESPN in the women's leagues. You get, for any point score, you get 1 point, 3 points, the same deal. Rebounds, you get a point, assists, you get a point, steals, you get 2, and blocks, you get 2. And so this is the points formula, basically, for the women's league. And this can change depending on whatever league you're in. This is the default one, right? And so if I want to plot my fantasy points instead of my real world points, I've got to feed this in somehow. And I could just do it in tidy and just do the long formula, which is a bit gross, right? But because I'm using this Lang expression, if you were to type this ESPN WNBA default into R, it wouldn't actually evaluate. It would just kind of print this thing back out for you, right? And so what that means is here, I can just add a new column to my player box that says, hey, give me the fantasy points, right? And so this was the scoring rules that I used before. All these are columns that already exist in my data set. And so instead of having to write out all of this one at a time, I can just define my scoring rule. And then this double exclamation mark says, evaluate this formula I've passed for you. Yeah.
Oh, no, with the expert.
Yeah, so this is what it is. I'm glad that you haven't seen it before, Harriet, because that makes me feel better about the fact I also hadn't seen it before. Because it's very new. Like I've only just learned it very recently. So I could add this to my list of things that I've learned. So this double equals basically allows me, instead of having to write like points plus 3 points plus assists plus 2 times blocks plus, 2 times steals, and you can have really long scoring formulas. And so like if I'm writing this code for someone else, being able to do this in this format also makes it more useful if you want to change your scoring. Yeah, you can just substitute in a different role. So I thought this was cool. So I like that I could share that with you today.
Wait, what did I do? Sorry.
Yeah. So here, this
Add all the
yeah. Just adds all my different, so in this player box, sorry, I'll go back. Yeah, so if I go back and show you the player box again. So all these things are just automatically downloaded in the player box. There's all those different, like you can see all the different types of things that I might want to include in my scoring rule. And so when I'm going back to creating my...
But so the double exclamation is the sum of all the parts.
So the double exclamation mark is a bit tricky. So let me try and I understand this is tricky because the first time I saw this, I'm like, I don't want to deal with that. I just deleted that person's code and then rewrote it in a different way. And a year later, I had to learn what the double exclamation mark is. So if it feels confusing, I get it. So like what this line of code typically would be is like, where am I? Wrong screen. Yeah. Yeah. So like imagine I wanted, can I select all of this? Oh, no. I was like, that'd be too good. I can do it here. Can I select it? Sorry, it's a bit slow. So this is what I would want to write as my scoring formula. And so then like here, I need to change my player box and add a new column in for that scoring formula. And so like what I would have to do in the past is write all of this out in order to update that variable. But because I've used this, because I've been a bit clever, and I've used this Lang expression. Sorry, it's very hard to be on TV and I should just be looking at the laptop. I don't know why it's making me very confused, this setup, because I've used this Lang expression. This doesn't evaluate that code. It just says, like, this is the formula I want. And then it allows me to pass it through on the next page into this here. So it will be evaluated. And this bang bang operator here, this thing, this tells it just evaluate the exact thing that I've given you. Yeah. So, yeah.
So is it like you have defined the formula in a function format and then you're calling the function?
Kind of, I wouldn't even say it's a function. It's just you could do it the same, like, again, I'm gonna stop looking at that screen. I could literally do something like, if you were to type this in your R terminal, like rlang express like 1 + 1, right? If you put 1 + 1 into your terminal, it's going to say it = 2. If I put this into my terminal, it returns 1 + 1. Yeah. And
also, it keeps each part separate still, but within the thing, and you don't have to write it all out.
Yep. So it's cool, super handy.
Questions and points, all those are columns, individual columns.
Yeah, so those are all columns in my player box.
If you tried to run it without the rlang, it would get an error because it would go, well, where's points? And so because points and all those variables are defined within the data set itself, when you delay the evaluation until you're like inside the data set with the tiny functions, that's how it doesn't return an error. That's why you can do it inside the tibble mutate, because it's aware of those variables.
Yeah. And so same code as before, but now all I've done is just, instead of plotting real world points, I'm plotting my fantasy points. And so again, you can see this relationship between the more minutes you play, the more points you score. So I want to be picking up and adding players who are going to play big minutes. And you can see that the top of this has changed. This is now 60 points. It's much bigger totals because I'm adding all these other things in, the assists and the rebounds and the other stuff.
Was the points you had before only the scored points?
Yep.
Like goals.
They were the actual hoops. There were hoops. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Okay. And so, like, I had this vision that I want to be able to make these decisions and I want to be able to create visualizations. And so, like, how I'm going to do that? Well, I can do a lot of it very simply using the data I showed you already, and I'll show you the examples of that. But if I want to get into the real gritty detail, I need to go a step further, and not all the data I want to do fantasy is in these apps. Some of it I need is like the list of player positions. So if I go back to here again, you can see that like Derek White is my point guard, right? Oops, sorry. But here, if I look at him, he can play in 2 positions. He can be my shooting guard or my point guard. Similarly down here, Karl Anthony Towns, he can play my center or my point forward position. So your optimization of matching players to positions, I actually need additional data about what positions they can play. And for each fantasy league, they'll allow you slightly different positions for different players. And so finding that data was really hard. I think this is an accurate, this link here I've added. Let's see if I can open it, the new tab. Yeah. So let's just go sort of a projection. So you can see, I think you could scrape the positions from here. I have a draft list from early in the season that I've been using from a PDF that I got information out of, but you can get it from here as well. You also need information about a depth chart. So what does that mean? Well, it helps you understand things like who's playing when. In the interest of time, maybe I should just keep going. But like, who's my starting players versus who's my next level players. And then you also need things like injuries.
Next play.
What's that?
So when you say play for next play.
So I might start on the court and I'll sub off and someone else will come on. Typically, people who start play more minutes than people who get subbed on. Yeah.
Does basketball have rule with number of subs or like time of subs?
Don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, and I'll make some other comments. So what I like about Fantasy World is it's not the real world, and that makes them really like people love NBA basketball stuff, right? Like as I said, you sneeze, people know. Yeah. Fantasy World's kind of more open to play with. I feel like there's been less development in this space. And so it's kind of nice. A good player in the real world doesn't mean a good player in Fantasy World. So for example, if I'm an amazing defensive player, I'm not scoring a lot of points necessarily. That means I don't translate into fantasy value. So you can have someone who plays lots of minutes, has really good defensive value, but isn't going to translate into fantasy value. So that's kind of interesting. In Fantasyland, there's no team, right? Like I've got Boston Celtics players, I've got San Antonio Spurs players, I've got Sacramento Kings players. There's no team, right? In the real world, if a team wins or loses, that performance of all those players is kind of related. And so in the same way you would like diversify an economic portfolio where you get different stocks, you can diversify your team portfolio in terms of getting different members from different teams. And so the strategy around building a good team in Fantasy World is actually very different. Like I wouldn't want to just pick all the same players from the same team. That probably wouldn't be a good fantasy strategy. Actually, it's a really bad fantasy strategy. And even more interesting is a bad player, like a mediocre player, can be sometimes better than a good player. So I talked before about having 2 games back to back. A mediocre player who plays 5 games in a week and has a 30-point average, that's 150 points. A good player who plays 2 games in a week and scores 40 points is only going to give me 80 points at the end of the week. So if I'm trying to add and drop players, picking a bad player, depending on the game schedule, can be more advantageous. Yeah.
They're all the same league.
Mhm.
Why would one player play 5 games and another one only play 2?
Because the week-to-week game schedule changes.
Mm.
Yeah, and so most of the time, like in a week, it'll be 3 or 4 games, but there are some weeks where a team will play 2 games and another team will play 5. Yeah, and so this is why not being able to look at the game schedule is really bad for decision making. Yep.
And you look at who they are playing against as well, because
I should. But it's not, and so like this is part of it. Like you want to make good decisions. That is 100% relevant. So I don't know, does anyone follow NBA? No. Last week there was Bam scored the top number of points in a game ever. It was like 83 points or something. And he was playing the Washington Wizards, who were at the bottom of the ladder. And so like that kind of created the right conditions for him to really have an amazing scoring game. Yeah. Yes. Okay. I think I skipped a section, sorry. I think hopefully you've understood that I'm getting towards this place of like data to decisions. If you've ever seen the R for Data Science textbook, this is the classic image in the R for Data Science textbook. I want to say that it's missing something. I'm going to criticize it. This fabulous thing that is really, really great. So you start by you import your data, you tidy it, you transform it into whatever you need. You visualize it. Ideally, you can see there's no visualization in the app that I currently have. So that's a big problem. You fit a model. There is a model technically. I've got an average, like a short-term average, a long-term average. There are models I can use, and you go through this visualization cycle and then you communicate. And so I don't think the visualization step is there. The communication is in the form of tables. So this data to decision-making pipeline could be made better just by adding in visualization. But I do think there should be another step here, which is decision-making. So a lot of the time when like we're speaking to people, it's very one way. If I'm writing a report from someone, maybe I just give it to them and they never see it, or I'm writing a technical paper and my audience reads it and maybe they cite me, whatever happens to it, but it's pretty one way. And so when you start to deal with stakeholders of your research or your work, you start to realize that having them as decision makers is actually really important, and what they need to make decisions about probably should inform what you're trying to create in terms of models. And there really needs to be this feedback loop that kind of encompasses this whole chain of information that says, hey, once you fit that model, once you visualize that data, this is the decision I need to make with it. You need to update this. Yeah. And so I think there's a missing link at the end that should have, this co-design where we repeat this process. Yes.
Emergency services and whatnot.
Yeah.
You communicating, like you say, word, blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
Means nothing unless the person hearing it says, yes, I understand.
Yep.
Some feedback from it. So yeah, emergency services, it's part of the standard.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I get it. Yeah, it's so important. Like, yeah. And the more I work with people, the more I realize that my research is better if I listen to what they need and want in terms of making their decisions. Okay, so I want to get to the point where I can show you some visualizations of my teams. This is some of the pseudocode that I've written all these functions to get to a point where I can look at my player data. So I download my data, I add my fantasy points, I get my fantasy point summary by player. You can add and change your roster, so I can update my teams. I get my fantasy roster. I generate a quick lineup, so that's my allocation of players to positions for every day. I get a deterministic forecast. So I worked in statistical forecasting for weather. Deterministic means kind of one vision of the future, whereas you might have a probabilistic forecast, which is like, this is the range of things that could happen. So right now I'm just playing with deterministic forecasts, but I would like ensemble forecasts and probabilistic forecasts in the future. I played a little bit with that, but not today. My R code decided to crash before I came today, so you're lucky you get to have screenshots. So hopefully I've given you this image of professionalism, but we all have issues. And so this is an older example of once you do all these things, you can do your team comparison. So here my team is in the pink and my opponent's team is in the blue. And this was looking like a really, really bad week for me, fantasy-wise. And it's just because of the game schedule, right? So sometimes when those games line up, they have more players than you playing, and that's enough for them to have more points and they might win at the end of the week. So there's some luck, there's some not luck involved. Yeah.
In total, like thing, your points don't accumulate over the season. Is it just like the number of wins you get against opposing people?
Yeah.
Is it better than to optimize where some weeks you destroy and other weeks you don't win at all?
Yep.
To then have like a bigger number of like total wins.
Yeah. So I've had weeks where I've got blown out of the water and I'm like, I'm definitely not winning this week. There's no way, because I've looked at my forecast and I know. And so towards the end of the week, I pick up players that will put me in a good position to win the following week instead. Yeah. Yes.
And there's mostly one person per week. It's not like.
Yep. There are other formats where you play everybody at the same time. So what I'm doing here is called a head-to-head matchup, but there's other formats called like category formats where you do like who won the most rebounds in your league, who won the most assists, and you play everybody at the same time. And then you got to optimize for different stuff. Yeah, so this is an example. Once you do all this, you can look at on a given day, am I likely to win or not? Ignore the little lines. Yeah. And then you can look at your cumulative projection over the week, right? And so this is what you need to make decision-making power. So I was looking at this at the beginning of the week, and I've got two lines here. I've got a dash line, yeah, and that's the team at the start of the week with no player changes. And then I've got a solid line, which is what if I change some of my players, do I give myself a better chance of winning? And you might be like, Kate, I'm the pink team. You might be like, Kate, it looks like you didn't do very good player changes that week because your line didn't go up very much. But actually I had an injury for my star player and he was on the bench that week. So even though he was in my injured reserve list, so I picked up additional players, but that loss of that player meant that it didn't actually make that big a change. Yeah. And in the end, this is just a projection, right? This is not exactly what happened in the real world. I won this week, not because I did anything great, but because my opponent's players just didn't perform very well that week. Yeah. And to help me make some of these decisions about who I should add and drop, I've visualized the matchup schedule. So when people are playing, right? And you're like, this looks very complicated, but there are 31 teams who play in NBA basketball. So I'm showing you my men's stuff because this is happening now, by the way. And so here, this is how many games they played on the far left. This is how many games they played that week. So you can see Chicago played 5 games this week. versus say like Oklahoma who played 3, right? And I don't need, once the game's happened, I don't actually need to see what's going on, so I can get rid of that data. So I've written this in a way that I can screen out any games that have happened, and then I can decide how far ahead into the future I want to look. And so then this is the following week and when teams are playing. So like I'm getting towards the end of the week, I think I'm going to win. I can make some strategic moves to put me in the best position to win the following week. So I'm looking at who's going to play this next week and trying to pick up people. And so now I have a visualization to help me do that. Yeah, okay. And I think I'm about to be cut off, so I'll say some things really quickly. So co-design means you work with other people, right? And so the fantasy league I play in is actually with my basketball team. I think they made a terrible decision to invite someone who has a PhD in statistics to play fantasy basketball with them, but that's okay. And so like I listen to them and I gather feedback from them about what fantasy design should be. And so I've learned how they make decisions using the existing app already. But I also think, listen to what their challenges are for decision making and like, what are their perceived challenges? Could I solve them? And what are the actual things that I can't overcome? I also have, like, I want to create a sandpit where other people can play and make player changes and adds and drops to see what their team will look like. That's what I'm working towards when I'm writing this code. And so I have to listen to them about the limitations of what I'm suggesting. I described one of the guys on my team to ChatGPT earlier and asked it to create a vision of him to put in the slide so it was anonymous. I said he's an older guy who likes shooting 3-pointers and he's slightly wider. And this is what came out. He likes the Lakers. And so this is some of the things we've spoken about. He's like, well, sometimes players returning from injury, they don't play back-to-back games, right? Because you're managing people's load throughout the season for injuries. Top players have their minutes reduced when teams are up. So if you're typically a star player, you're trying to have a bit of time off, like rest your body, you won't, if your team's really high up, you won't play on the court. So that's one of the things he worries about. It's also common to sit out players for load management as the season progresses. So the probability of taking the court anytime will change throughout the season. And these are all really important things that you learn by talking to people who are your stakeholders effectively. And I can think about ways to solve these problems, and this will come in the fitting of the model stage. I think I'm running out of time, but this is definitely a doable thing that I can address. And luckily for me, there's a lot of data about injuries. Like these are all the injuries in the women's league. Yeah. Groin illness, left ankle, left. Nose injury. Pregnancy. I thought that one was interesting. Rest, rib injury, ACL. Yeah. Well, it's not in, there's rest and other reasons in there, but like it's interesting to me that that data is available for me to look at. Yeah, which is good. I think it's good. This is my friend Ben. This is him shooting a floater. Sorry, anonymous friend with curly hair who's good at shooting floaters. This is not how you shoot a floater, by the way. They don't know. And
It start by facing goal.
yeah. I know, but it's good though. I enjoy it. How are you going to deal with injuries? Orphan players have no fixed timeline to return, and the date given for their return is completely made up. And actually, when he first said this to me, I'm like, all right, that's fair. And I have no idea, right? I had zero idea. I'm like, that's actually something I can't solve. I can't address. And so this is Anthony Edwards. He's on my team. He's out. He's going to be out for at least 1 week, right? So I know, because I can read, that when I read this information, that the date they give me for his return is probably not going to be the exact date. And often they'll say, we're going to reevaluate on this date, or this person is doubtful or questionable. There'll be certain language that indicates whether a player is going to come back and play. And I was like, I don't know how to deal with that. I can't translate this text into information for me to use in my modeling. It was like, this is a barrier, right? And then along came Elmer. And I think Elmer is cool. It basically allows you to do stuff with large language models in R. So now I can pass in that text about the player news and ask it like, hey, is it likely this player is going to return on a given date based on the text blurb? And so for everybody in my league, I can now use this to understand better the injury management that's going on and turn that into actual data I can put into a statistical model. I think that's very, very cool. Haven't had a chance to do it yet, but yeah.
You have lots of like historical data for injuries, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Have you tried making a model of like the length of time that they're out based on the previous data from the injuries and comparing that to the estimates from?
I haven't. My intuition around that would be to look at how long you're out for a given injury. So if it's a toe, you might be out for 2 or 3 weeks, or if it's a MCL, you're gone for the season or something. Yeah. So to get other data to cross-reference with injuries, that was yeah. Oh, sorry. Just oh no. I'm definitely over, but I did say this was about data to decisions. And so I said I think that pipeline needs to be updated. I think there's one extra step that I'd like everyone to think about. And it's like message. Does the thing you've communicated actually support decision making? Right? So I like pat myself on the back. I did a great job. I did a great model. I did beautiful visualizations. I communicated my results. No, you need to stop and talk to the people you're working with. Did that help? Right? Who are the end users and what are their decision-making needs? Like, how are they going to interact with the thing that you've given them? Like, what's the difference? Like, some users will want to interpret information differently. You have to think about who your audience is. And for fantasy basketball, it can be kids in school all the way up to, you know, full adult population demographic with all levels of different literacy. Medium, how do people want to interact? I think tables are bad, but maybe for a lot of people, that's how they do want to interact. And I have to accept that. I think visualizations are better. And in this, I fit a model. Sometimes a complex statistical model is over the top for the decision-making needs. It's important to stop and calibrate those two things. Did the model I fit, was it targeted at the decision-making? How do these two things connect together? And I would say co-design is collaborative. You have to work alongside people with expertise in that domain and really listen to what they're saying. And so that takes a lot of time. It takes a huge amount of time professionally. It's something that I've resented at times because it takes so much effort to build relationships with people. You really have to listen to their domain expertise. If they say they're worried about something, they're probably worried about it for a reason, and you shouldn't dismiss it. You have to listen when it gets uncomfortable. So if they don't like your model that you fit, that you think is beautiful, you have to be like, okay, fair enough. I will take that on board and I will sit with for a while and maybe change things. And that means incorporating feedback when you can. For me, fantasy basketball is just stats. I love it. It's so much fun. When I'm doing this, I think about new questions I could ask all the time. And like, as I said, long term, I want to build this into a play pit for people to manage their fantasy teams. I don't think there's a really good women's fantasy basketball manager out there. Lots of men's at the moment, but I think the women's space is pretty open for me to contribute something useful, and that's cool. And that's it. And I definitely went over time. Sorry. Thank you.
The Elmer package,
Yeah.
is it cloud-based or is there a local?
I think you can just use it locally on your computer. Yeah. Yeah.
So you can choose like whether you can.
So they have like an option that like sends out the HTTP request to the API. So yeah. So let's say if you want to use ChatGPT, you can just initialize it with chat, open it, and then later on get to the chat and then send it to the prompt.
I put the link to the tutorial material here because it was really good. I strongly recommend having a play and learning how to use it. I think it opens up a world for playing with text data that wasn't there before. That's super cool. Yeah. And I found it mostly easy to understand and work through the materials and get started and have a play. Yeah. Yeah.
Have you considered incorporating game theory ideas on
Oh,
this?
yes, this is so fun. There is an aspect to this. So like I have a player and they're really good, but I want to drop them. Like when do I drop them to kind of disincentivize someone else from picking them up? That's one example. Or like how do I think about the pool of players in a like, game theoretic way, or what other people's moves and choices might be? I haven't. I think it seems like a very natural extension to some of this stuff. Yeah. And it makes it quite hard if I'm trying to do a projection, because I'm like, oh, I might want to pick up this player later in the week, but if someone picks them up, someone else picks them up, I won't get them. So there's like choices to be made. Yeah.
Also, when you play, you each take turns to choose the player.
So I can pick up a player anytime I like. Harriet could pick up a player anytime she likes. So it's whoever gets there first, basically. Yeah. And so some of my league got a bit serious this year, and they were like picking up players instantly the second they could. They're like 11 a.m. in a work day picking up players. So yeah. Yeah. Hey.
Have you got these slides available?
I think they will be shared as part of, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask around like when would you and what would you use an LLM for? So it sounds like you would look at getting more data in. Is there room to use AI to try and work more of your statistical modeling out to kind of throw all of this at it and say, hey, tell me which, you know, compare games, injuries, what my opposition has, and come up with a better system?
So I think there's like, I have a friend Kiri, and she's always like, we'll just do the AI, and she likes to joke about it, where you just throw everything into the model, because that's sometimes when you work with stakeholders, that's what they want, and so you just throw everything in and you get some model out. And so on some level I will do that for the fun of it. I'm also going to try and compare it to other statistical models and see which ones perform better. When it comes to how I imagine I use AI for this in particular, I can read this graph and I can interpret it in a very like deep and meaningful way in terms of what decisions I should make. But I also have a PhD in statistics, and I'm conscious that other people may not read and interpret the information in the same way that triggers them to make the right decisions. And so I think there is a role here for me to be using, say, AI to help people understand the information that's being given to them and manage their team. So for example, I can use Elma. Elma doesn't see pictures. It doesn't see the graphics, right? It does see the raw data. And so Elma can interpret the data frame itself and give some information about what these things mean that could be useful for someone at the other end. Yeah. So that's how I envision using it.
Yeah. One more thing, and maybe a driver if anyone else wants to join.
Yeah.
March Madness is
yeah.
a thing that's on. It's I don't know anything about basketball or March Madness, but I think it starts the next few days and it only goes for 2 weeks. And it's an ESPN fantasy thing, and you can start a league with your friends.
Yeah.
There's a whole bunch of articles out there on put this in Claude or ChatGPT and see if I can pick my friends. I haven't watched any of them.
Yeah.
Do you have any recommendations on how to approach March Madness?
So I think I haven't played with the college data. College data is interesting because there's less of it, and there's less of a history for those players, right? And so that means when you're estimating things, you have much higher variability, and that makes the prediction component much more difficult. If you did want to play with that data, it's here. So all of the data that I pulled down earlier for the NBA leagues, it's all there for the women's and men's college basketball teams as well. So if you do want to go crazy on March Madness, you can. Yeah. Yeah.
When you do the queries with Elma prompts, I don't know.
Yeah.
How does like the ones for cleaning or pulling data, are they different to the ones where if I'm like writing an email? Like are there
Yes, there is some structural differences, and if you go to the tutorials, it will talk about how to take text and turn it into structured data. So like here's some text like Kate is female, she likes playing basketball, and she I don't know, plays piano or something. And then you could be like, pull out Kate's name and Kate's hobbies, and you could have a column for like name and hobby. and it would take that text entry that's free and then convert it into a structured data frame format for you to use. That's one of the ways you can use it. Yeah, and again, it tells you how to do this, and you have to think about, because you are querying something, you have to subscribe to the API and pay a small amount for your tokens, and then you have to think about how big are these queries for the amount of money I pay. So you have to be a little bit conscious that it's not free. Yeah.
All right, let us speak off the hook. Thank you so much, Kate. We'll give everyone that.
And that's all, folks. Thank you so much for joining us. There's no more really to add. I just want to say thank you. There's some refreshments and some snacks, so please make yourselves welcome here. Thank you for joining online. And once again, let's say thanks to Kate.